Welcome to the One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sallenberger. On today's podcast, I chat with Susan McConnell about Somatic IFS. Hey everyone. I cannot express to you how excited I am about this podcast and how excited and parts of me were so nervous to talk to Susan McConnell. Susan has written this book, Somatic Internal Family Systems, Awareness, Breath, Resonance, Movement, and Touch in Practice. Susan is an IFS lead trainer, and she's been around, I think, since the early days. Dick does a really sweet and a little bit vulnerable, I think, forward in the book. So I'm just going to say a couple things and then we will get started. If you want to know more about Susan or just hear more from her, IFS Talks, which is another IFS podcast, has Susan on twice. So I put a link to that podcast in the show notes. Also, Derek Scott will be having her on in February for his IFS Masterclass series that he does. So you can find him and the sign up for the masterclass at ifsca.ca. So those are two resources I thought you would like to know about. One of the things that I love that Susan says is when we come back to our bodies, we feel like we've come home. I'll leave you with that. Enjoy.
Hi, Tammy.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, it's good to see you. It's good to see you and your room and just to connect with you in this way. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm in my office, and I feel fortunate that I get to come into my office. And I do all my sessions over Zoom still, but it's nice to get out of the house.
Yes, a whole different boundary around your personal life, right?
Oh
It's
my
good.
gosh, yeah, yeah. What about you? I love your home. I love all the wood. It's beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah, we this home it's has sort of an ambiguous first floor because this is really sort of the first floor, and yet because we're on kind of a sand dune, this half of the first floor is actually a basement. So you can probably see, the daylight back in that side. So actually most of our living is on the second floor.
Okay.
Um, all the bedrooms and, great room, etc. But this is a very nice private place to be able to do my Zoom meetings too. So
Good, that's nice, and it's not like you're in a dark basement, like, my poor husband he's working from home, has been since COVID, and he's in, like, our dark basement.
oh yeah, him and Joe Biden, right? All these jokes about Joe sitting in the basement, but basements are good, It's
Right,
as long
right.
as you have enough light. I just flipped on another light because yeah,
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 yeah. So, why don't we start with you telling everybody where you are in the world? I like to give everybody, just an idea of where you are and what you see, like, if you were to look out a window, what do you see?
yeah. Well, in terms of where I am, there's a bit of an update here because I've been Chicagoan since I think 69, 68, something like that. And and then about 20 years ago, we got sort of just was going to be a weekend home out here in Indiana Dunes because I just felt this desire to be closer and closer intimate connection with nature, and so we have the lake not too far away from our house here, and we have a lot of woods and ponds and stuff and streams. And then more and more as the years went on, we found ourselves spending not a lot more than a weekend out here, try to stretch that weekend even longer. And then once the pandemic hit, we realized after a few months we haven't even been back to Chicago, because the mayor closed down the access to the lake and the parks. And we had moved at that point into an elevator building, and that wasn't very pleasant. So we were able to sell our condo in Chicago, which now means we have only one home, which is a lot simpler and easier to find out whether you've actually lost something or you just happen to have it in the other home.
Right.
So, so yeah, so I am in Michigan City, Indiana, And we've over the 20 years that we've had this home here, we've really built up quite a nice community of people that that we connect with. So yeah, it's been just sort of a gradual shift of our, and now we're Hoosiers. So from, a blue state to a red state, but a lot of really interesting people have settled in northwestern Indiana.
Mm,
So yeah, so we're
mm.
happy here.
That's great. It's funny when you said that about being on a sand dune. I thought, wait, aren't you in Chicago? Because when I think of sand dunes, I think of more like a beach or water area.
Hmm. So you were thinking I'm living in Chicago
I
still.
know.
Yeah.
So I was like, that doesn't, wait. Yeah.
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 Well, I miss it a little bit, and we were just there a couple days ago, and I thought, yeah, it's good to live so close, like an hour or a little bit more than an hour from the city. So it's very possible to just pop in there. Of course, there's not a whole lot to do right now,
Yeah.
but hopefully this won't last too long, and we'll be able to go back and enjoy a lot of what the city has to offer, but
Yeah.
still enjoy what a more spacious, access to nature also gives
Mhm.
us. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does help through this crazy time to be
How
able to
about
be
you? Where are you,
outside.
Tammy?
I live in New Hampshire. So I live in New Hampshire and I'm about 20-ish minutes from the ocean and
Mm.
probably 20 minutes from lakes and mountains, probably an hour from mountains. It's very beautiful. I live in like a Hallmark movie
Oh,
town.
oh, wonderful.
That's what it looks like. So it's beautiful. The weather here is beautiful about 6 months out of the year. We have amazing summer. It's not too humid and we get to go. Well, we didn't this year because our governor closed down a lot of like the access to the ocean and stuff. Like with parking and stuff, it was awful. But um there's a part of me that's saying, what privilege? Oh, it was awful. I couldn't park at the ocean.
I know.
Oh
I know.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then 6 months out of the year, it's just too cold, and we're like, "Why do we live here?" Because it just gets cold and snowy, and the snow is beautiful, but when it's still snowing in March, you're like, "Come on, it's too much." March
Oh,
and April can still be snowy, and that's when it gets really hard.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I am super excited to talk about your book.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited about it. I love talking about my book. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I think it's I don't wanna play favorites, but, I think it might be one of my favorite IFS books.
No, of
It's
course
really
I'll
that
take
good.
that. So thank you. Yeah.
So what I thought we could do today, if this feels okay for you, is really just talk about the basics and like hang out in that first, like I said, like 60 pages that are the intro and just the your intro and then the intro to somatic IFS.
Mhm. Sure.
Does that sound good?
That sounds good.
Let me ask you this, like right now, what is a practice that you and I could do right now to help our bodies be more present with each other? And the listeners could maybe even do in their bodies that would help them be more present with us during this conversation.
That's a great idea, Tammy. It just kind of emerged very spontaneously, right? Yeah. Just as we're present with each other, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to be
Yeah.
even more present and present with the people who will be listening to this in the future and inviting them to be present with us. I always start with, in fact, that's kind of also is what I talk about with that introductory paragraph. We have to start with ourselves. So you and I can both just simply turn our attention from interacting with each other and even thinking about the future about how will this podcast go, but just to come back a little bit more deeply with our own the fact that we're sitting here,
Mm.
right? So we just can notice the places in our body that are making contact with the floor or the chair. And you notice my I slow down a bit because that slowing down invites us to really be able to pay that kind of attention that our bodies ask for. So we can just begin with that, noticing that we're connected with the floor, with our chairs. Feel the weight of our bodies, of our muscles and our bones. Just bringing our awareness to our bodies, we may also notice. Sometimes my attention is drawn to places in my body where I hold some tension. And sometimes simply being aware of that allows it to let go a little bit. Could be the jaw, somewhere else in the face or the head. It could be the back of the neck, or our shoulders. And we're not asking it to let go. We're just simply bringing our awareness to it. Like, oh, yeah, little holding on in my shoulders this morning. And it tends to dissolve as I pay attention to it. And then I go down a little bit lower. I notice my diaphragm, my respiratory diaphragm, just the places that I know typically that I might hold tension, my belly. And as I do all this, I notice I might make some very slight little shifts in my posture so that my body isn't fighting against gravity, but rather can be in harmony with this gentle weight of the force of gravity just hugging me to the earth. So instead of fighting it, I welcome it to just help me feel my place of belonging right where I am now. I don't need to be anywhere else but where I am right now. And as I do that, I'm noticing myself, I end up taking a fuller breath, starting with that first practice of somatic awareness, which is what I've been guiding us in, kind of automatically leads to the next one, which is the awareness of our breathing, conscious breathing. We just notice that we are breathing. We don't need to change it. But it's something, just being aware of our breathing, it's something that we often don't do. It's always just a moment away, a breath away, literally. And it can be very profound, right? It's like we both feel that, just going, oh, yeah, noticing the inhale, just noticing the sensations as we let the air come into our lungs, and then different sensations as the air leaves our lungs, leaves our body, leaves our throat and our mouth and our nose. After a few breaths, we can even begin to enjoy the rhythm, maybe even be soothed or lulled by the rhythm of our breath. It's one of the many rhythms of our body. And most people find it pretty relaxing and a rhythm that just helps us to increase our ability to be present. And these two practices are really very foundational for entering into a relationship, which is what you'd suggested, like so that we can be more present to each other. Because as we feel anchored to our rooted, maybe is a better word, to our place where we belong, our home, our mother, really reconnecting with that first connection, and then opening to the infinite space around us, and breathing in that space, breathing in a bit more spaciousness, so any agendas that we may have been holding on to, or any concerns or fears, just kind of let them go as we just relax into this breath. That actually is just a wonderful resource as we enter into this relational realm. So as you and I just enjoy this exploration that will unfold together, we have established a really good foundation with the earth and with the sky, which are the two elements that I associate with these two practices. So we enter into the third of the practices right now, as we shift our awareness just from our own body and mind and our own internal system to this relationship between you and I as we are gazing at each other on our screens. And I'll just mention that the element that goes along with this third practice, which is resonance, and I always put an adjective in front of each of the words, so it's a radical resonance. So the element associated with radical resonance is the element of water. And that's such a wonderful element to help us in relationship. Yeah, right. You're just moving and shifting, and me too, just sort of feeling into the wateriness of all the systems of my body, knowing that we are three-fourths water, so it's very easy to access our fluid nature. And we can just trust the ever flowing aspects of relationship, right? And yeah, so I'll stop there for now, okay? Just and just would say a word maybe to the people who've been listening to this, and just to take a moment too, as we do, Tammy, to notice any shifts from those few minutes of guiding through mainly the first two parts, and opening to the third one. Do you want to say anything about what you notice?
Um, well, first of all, that was amazing. And I was like, oh, keep going, keep going. This could be the whole thing. Wow, this is amazing. Yeah, so I just noticed that sort of this part of me, which I had shared with you before, like this part of me that's just like the giddy excited to talk to you. Um, so there's that part that's even was, even had a harder time settling down. But yeah, what I do notice and what I'm noticing in my body is more of a stillness, or even as I'm moving around, it actually feels more of like this fluid movement instead of the jittery, all
Mm,
over the place movement. Like it's still movement, but it actually feels a lot more grounded. It's like grounded movement that feels really good. I've been a little bit um, just feeling a little bit all over the place this morning. So this actually, so what I'm noticing right now is, wow, I don't stillness actually, if I try to force stillness, that wouldn't probably feel really good. But having this movement, and I'm like touching my knees, I'm sort of sitting crisscross applesauce on top of like a yoga block.
mm.
And so this movement actually feels really uh, grounded and rooted and very calming versus my spazzy
Oh,
spazzy movement of earlier.
yeah. Oh, it
Yeah.
shifted things pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's
And
great.
actually, as I listened to you, I realized that you named the other two practices and demonstrated them actually, because it's movement, mindful
Oh,
movement,
right.
right? Through the resonance, you found yourself as you're resonating with yourself and with me and this whole experience together. You're moving, and your moving is different, right? Your movement changed with the foundation of the earlier practices to become more rooted. And I could see that because it seemed like it was rooted through your pelvis, right? The movement that I could see was in your upper body, and yet still connected to the earth. And then you said, and I'm just, I'm touching, my hands are just automatically going. So that's the final practice, which is attuned touch.
And I didn't do that on purpose, I promise.
No, I know you didn't. It was very, very just fluid, right? It's just
I love it. Yeah.
flowed from the other practices before that. And that's what I found. That's really why I organized my Somatic IFS in that way, as it just seemed when I really tried to get a sense of this work, it seemed like there were these five practices that of course come down to us from so many wonderful practices, right? So many body, mind, spirit practices from ancient perennial philosophies and indigenous cultures and everything that we so benefit from. And it just seemed like this was a natural order of them too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And even as you spoke, um, it definitely felt like a natural order. Like this is just what we would, of course, we would notice this awareness first, and then as we notice the awareness, we would notice the breath. Um, and that's one of the things that I loved about your book is you gave so many examples of that, of your own process of um, doing the 5 practices, and as you talked through the practices, just like you did right now, as I was reading, I could feel them happening to me. As you were describing it happening for you, I was experiencing it as I was reading. I don't know that I've ever had a book impact me that way. Like, I was actually feeling it as I was reading it.
Oh, that's probably some of the best feedback I've gotten yet. I love hearing that, Tammy. As I was writing it, of course, I didn't know if, how the readers, how it would be received. And that probably is the hope that I had throughout, that I wouldn't be causing people reading the written word to just go more or less cognitively, but that it would invite people to a deeper experience of their body. So that, thank you so much for saying that.
Well, that makes me happy that it feels good for you. And the other thing is, it was this really interesting thing where it really stimulated my like learner intellect parts, but not
Hmm.
in a way that it was disconnected from my body. Like, it was really, it was an interesting experience where I was having both at the same time, and it was
Mm.
it was again this flow of my learner parts where, like, my intention, I think I told you, my intention was, I mean, the book is pretty dense and there's so much you're offering in it. So I was planning on, like, oh, I'm a reader, I can skim this book easy peasy. I was like, nope. I had my highlighter, I had my pencil, but it
Mhm.
wasn't from this, you know learner school person. It wasn't from that.
Mhm.
It was more
Mhm.
this, like, it was my mind and my body was just taken. I was
Yeah,
just taken.
taken.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that because, probably if I had a purpose in writing this or a purpose in my life, if I would be so bold as to say that, trying to get really, or not bold even, but from a wide enough perspective, I think my life has really been about really reconnecting body and mind, that separation that happened hundreds of years ago in Western culture. That,
Yeah.
yeah.
So can we talk about that? Because I'm not someone who is, I've gotten better from doing IFS, but I'm not someone who's very in touch with my body. Like, um, and again, that's getting better, but it is not normal for me to be like, this is what my body is feeling, or, with that question of like, where do you find that in your body? I I am better again now, but when I first started doing IFS, I'm like, nothing. It's all up in my head, right? There's this cutoff. I'm doing like sort of slashing with my throat. Like, I learned, cognitive behavioral therapy in school. I was trained in DBT. Like, this is what was comfortable for me. Um, yeah. Yeah. So I guess my question for you is, why do you think there has been such a cutoff, like, in our culture, and in our time, from mind and body?
Yeah, well, first of all, it makes perfect sense to me what you just shared about your experience. And it makes me happy too to know that IFS has influenced you to be more connected with your body. Yeah. And that this book is like the next step for you, I think. Yeah. And I find it fascinating to see the parallels between our internal system and the wider systems. I think a lot of people are drawn to IFS because of that. Because we know that we're really not, even though it's very helpful as therapists to look at the individual system, the intrapsychic system, we know that it's so influenced by the external systems, from increasing levels, right? To our families, to our our communities, and to really the whole planet, the whole human species, and our ancestors as well. And I think that's not, I don't think we're born that way. I think we're born, and even if we go back far enough in our ancestors, we are actually, in some of our our resources, our gifts, our abilities to sense have really become more vestigial as we don't need them for our own survival. So, but I think, babies are all very, they're not verbal at all, right? They're all very right brain, and they're very much into their bodies and their own sensations. And then we lose that. And just to have maybe all of us, including the listeners, just consider, when did we develop parts that learned, for whatever reason, for whatever series of reasons, to cause us to disconnect even a little bit from our bodies.
Yeah. As you're saying that, one thing that comes up for me, and I think, a big thing is trauma, right? Um, when there's any trauma to our bodies, then that would obviously be a huge disconnecting thing. But one thing that came up for me as you're talking is the diet culture. Sort of this that I think is, for a little girl learning in elementary school that I'm supposed to be on a diet and I'm supposed to not like my body. And that's what other girls around me were doing. That's what my mom was doing. And that was, you know, um, something that was like, oh, okay, I'm not supposed to like my body. I'm supposed to be mad at it and I'm supposed to treat it this way. And okay, sort of, I think for me, just personally, that's sort of one of the first ways of disconnecting me from my body. One of the lines that you say on page 2 that I
Mhm.
highlighted was, my body needed a different relationship with me. I am a body. And I thought, well, yeah, like if that, yeah. So can you say more about that? This idea that I am a body?
Yeah, first of all, just going back to what you said, absolutely. There's so many factors that cause us to disconnect from our bodies, to come up with that belief that I have a body. I have a body that I sort of either don't like or criticize or drag to somebody to make feel better, or again, try to fix or improve or ignore, or all of our parts that relate to our bodies in a certain either objectifying way, or some other protector part, really.
Yeah, yeah,
I think you really spoke to that a bit. And so, just that language of I have a body, which makes me a bit separate from this body that I'm inhabiting. um, Rather, that I am my body. I am. I don't know if I said I am a body, but I'm thinking right now it's I am my body.
my body. I am my body.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's not to say that that we perhaps don't have what people might refer to as a soul. That of course none of us knows for sure. We have beliefs or faith or whatever about what happens to our bodies after our bodies die. But perhaps we are more than our body, and I am my body. And I just find that phrase really helps me to be in my body,
yeah,
rather than to read it as if it's like a few steps away from me.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think that does make sense. That protector parts probably from can early on disconnect us from our bodies, even if we feel like, now I'm thinking about like physical pain and people that have diseases, or people that have, feel like their bodies have, betrayed them for
Betrayed me,
various
exactly.
reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and you bring in, a lot of gendered stuff, so it really the whole concept intersects with so many different aspects of yeah, the economy and fashion, the marketplace, that in school, I think a lot of times, maybe our when we first enter kindergarten or preschool or whatever, and we have to sit still, we have to line up, we have to wait to use the bathroom. We're shamed if we honor our body's impulses, and a lot of that has to be done for our socialization and fitting into society. When we feel like hitting a kid who hits us, we're punished for that, we learn that that's not appropriate social behavior, and yet that impulse to hit might be inhibited in the body and in the nervous system, and somehow then is felt years later as some kind of tension, some kind of holding back. We can't,
Mm,
whether it's our sexual energy or our aggressive energy or even our well, actually, I'm thinking right now during this pandemic of our desire to hug, right? It's so natural. We see a friend socially distancing and we just kind of go, oh, and I can't hug you. Oh, like we feel that pain anew, right? And I just wonder what effect will that have on us,
mm.
to not get the touch that we need, that we kind of count on. What did they used to tell us? How many hugs a day do we need, to stay
Right.
physically and mentally healthy?
Or
But
our kids, right? Like, what is that happening with my kid who can't, rough around with his friends at school or can't,
oh,
has to be I mean, and my son is actually going to school, but, for so many kids that aren't seeing their peers or right, they can't be rough and tumble and yeah.
is he wearing a mask too at school?
Yeah, he goes to a really small private school, and I've been incredibly impressed. I don't We're very fortunate. The way the administration has handled it is amazing. But yeah, he wears a mask until he gets to his desk, and then the desks are all separate, and then he can take off his mask when he's at his
Oh,
desk.
well, good.
Yeah, and they do a lot
Good.
of stuff outside, but we'll see, the winter is terrible
Yeah,
here, so
right.
yeah,
It's
we
gonna
don't know
be a
what's gonna
long
happen.
6 months, right? But
Yeah,
the kids are creative and they're resilient and yeah, and how old is he?
he's 9.
9. Oh, it's a great age. Yeah, just so I think, throughout our lives, there's different things that can happen that can cause our parts to really cut us off from our bodies or have us over focus on our bodies or try to buff up our bodies, right? Or, to use our bodies as a ticket to some kind of acceptance or love
Yeah.
or whatever, right? So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Um, so tell me about this somatic. So I'm going to do another quote. Somatic IFS emphasizes that self must be embodied for its full expression.
Well,
Tell
that
me about that.
actually feeds right off of what we were talking about. Like when we are not embodied, it's really a part. It's natural for self to be embodied.
So I wonder that could be a cue. We talk a lot about cues of how do I know when I'm in a part, and so that could be a cue of okay, I'm not feeling embodied, I'm not connected to my body, and that can be a cue that I'm blended with a part.
Right. And the as we learn in the IFS training, the certain qualities that point to self energy, often, many of them begin with a letter C. And so sometimes when a client will say, I'll say, well, how do you, that wonderful IFS question, how are you feeling towards that part? And then maybe they'll say, oh, I'm feeling compassionate toward that part, which, if someone has had therapy with us for more than 2 or 3 sessions, they've learned that's the right answer, right?
Right.
So what I'll say is like, oh, yes, you feel compassionate. Okay, good. Um, where in your body are you feeling that compassion? Because when I look at each of those C words, calm, creative, curious, compassionate, clear, whatever, they do have a source in the body. So if the person, sometimes it's difficult to really be able to articulate where you feel compassion, but I will just sort of gently stay with that. Like, yeah, there's something in your body. Like when you told me you feel compassionate, something in your body lets you know that you're feeling compassion. Would it be okay if we just stay with your body a little longer, just to be curious about where do you feel that? And the other reason one reason I do that is because if the person is not feeling it in their body, then they're not really in touch with the fullest aspect of compassion. They might be feeling it sort of more mentally, cognitively. They might be even being able to remember a time when they have been able to feel compassionate towards that part. But in the present moment, how are you feeling it now? There's going to be something in the body. It might be a warmth, it might be a flow, it might be a tingling, it might be a sense of spaciousness, it might be a warmth. Did I say that already? It might just be some relaxation, some deeper breath that comes in. There's something that happens in the body when you really feel, wow, I really, yeah, I feel so much a desire to connect with this part. Another one of the C words, asking where do you feel it in the body either helps me find out is it a manager part instead of self, or how to even expand that sense of self energy to include the body. But also, when the person says, "Yeah, I feel this warmth in my heart," then I can say, "Can you send that warmth that you're feeling in your heart right now to that part?" So it gives me another tool to use, really, in helping to develop a relationship between the client and their part.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. One of the things you talk about in your book is you go through it's brilliant is that you go through the F's and and you talk about how it's a little bit different, how you use the body with each of the F's. And I think for me, I'm really big on like, okay, where do you find that in the body? You find it in your heart. Okay, move on. We're not talking about your body anymore. We
Right.
you focus on that. Okay, here we go. And so I loved that. So number one, you don't actually ask that question. Where do you find it in your body? You ask a question that's different, and then you include the body in each of the F's.
Hmm.
I just was like, wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you. Thank you. Of course, when I teach IFS, I tend to teach it that way too, because that's how, how the model was presented to me. I think I sneak the body in a bit more, maybe than some trainers, but yeah, and some people have said to me, well, I don't really know why you have formed a somatic IFS because IFS is quite body centered anyway. And I'm like, yeah, like you said, like IFS really helped you to become, more fully embodied. And yet, what I think traditionally, when we bring the body in more traditional regular IFS, we bring it in. Where do you find that part in your body? And then when we're ready for the unburdening step, we say, where is that burden in your body? And we do sort of tend to leave it out, which is our culture, right? We kind of do touch into the bodies at certain moments, and then mostly we leave it out.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah. So I have found it to really basically, I could use the word potentiate, make more powerful the model to bring the body in more fully. And there's been, so many, particularly recently with all the neuroscientific advances in our understanding of trauma and other clinical issues, and how both the nervous system and the body as a whole is involved in certainly in wounding as well as in healing. We really have to include the body for healing. So that has encouraged me to bring the body in with every step. So it's whether we're accessing a part or developing a relationship with a part, um, yeah, deepening that relationship and witnessing. Sometimes in terms of witnessing, we talked before about protectors and how they use the body, but exiles also, of course, are in the body, and they are often waiting to tell their stories. And I refer to them even as body stories, that there may be a verbal story and even a visual story, an emotional story, but there's also a body story, and it's important to include them all. Particularly with trauma, oftentimes the various aspects of what really happened to that person do get split off, as we know from our studies of trauma. They get cut off from each other, dissociated from each other. So a complete healing is going to be stitching those back together. So, but in some cases, the story is only available in the body. And so if we're not witnessing through the body, we're thinking that we're not getting the story at all.
Yeah.
If the story cannot be told for various reasons, verbally or with images or with memories, it often is trying to be heard through physical sensations. And if we don't listen, the physical sensations, just like we know exiles get more and more desperate, and they turn the volume up even louder. So physical sensations can turn into some pretty extreme pain, pretty extreme symptoms, even chronic illness and disease. So that's not to say that, of course, every illness is an exile trying to tell its story, but it's good to consider and to invite the part to tell its story so that it can be witnessed in the body. And that's somewhere also where attuned touch can come in, because my experience and training, and really probably have a couple decades of experience as a body worker, gave me the opportunity to feel the story through my hands. So, and that's not to say that therapists need those, hours and hours of body work training to open up the senses in their hands and in their body to receive through that, but to just begin to plant the idea that if the therapist is comfortable with touch, with actually placing their hand with the client's permission on a place, maybe a shoulder or the back of their, on the back behind their heart or something like that, or their neck, to place their hand somewhere with the client's full permission of all their parts, they can actually be communicating self energy and even perhaps witnessing the shifts that are happening in the body through their hand even. So just adding a whole nother dimension to our ability to listen.
It's unbelievable. So you talked about, I think there's a part of me that wants some more clarity around how the five practices. So the five practices are associated with the elements, and then they're also associated with different structures of the body. And
Yeah,
so I'm going to skip over the elements for just a second to ask this question. What's awareness connected to in the body?
that's a really good question. And what it makes me think about is I wasn't so much bringing in the body systems as a way of saying, um, say for example, if fascia is one of the body systems connected with somatic awareness. It's not necessarily that I'm saying, as a therapist, you should direct the person to focus in on their fascia in order to do this first step, of somatic.
Okay, yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
was wondering. Or I was wondering, like, okay, if you have a hard time with awareness, then focus on this part of your body or something like that.
Well,
Not
that
that.
could be if I mean, like say, let's say you have a client who is having trouble, like you say, getting below the neck. So it might be, I mean, fascia is kind of a bad example because most of us aren't aware that we even have fascia, right? We're aware of our muscles, right? We've been told since we're maybe 3 that, oh, make a muscle. But on the other hand, perhaps flexing a muscle, like I might find a client who says, I have no sensation at all from the waist down. And so I might then say, well, what are you aware of I might just start maybe just a couple inches below the waist, just to limit it a bit. Well, I don't know, it just feels numb. Well, is there a sensation that goes along with that numbness? I might say. And this is where we get into the muscles. I might say, if you'd like to feel, just sort of experiment with perhaps getting a little bit more feeling there, just to see how that is for your parts, to get a little bit more feeling in that area that has been so cut off. You could just feel into the muscles there. You could just even move your muscles, just tighten and loosen those muscles right there. Perhaps a little movement, so you're using those muscles. And then just a little bit, and then just stop and notice, what was that like? And of course, you can also use touch. You could put your hands there and just feel the numbness and just feel, maybe just even let your hands say, I know it's been important to you to cut this area off from me. I understand that. What would be bad about if I hadn't gone numb here? What would be bad about that? And then, of course, you can help the part realize that that was then, and maybe now it's not such a scary thing.
Mm,
So the body systems, I think I added that part when I was writing the book. I think I wanted to focus more on the specific. I just love the body, and I love these body systems, and I've loved learning about the body, and I wanted to bring that information in as a way to help everyone become more embodied, because it's really helped me.
mm,
In my training as a body worker, I of course had to learn about these systems, starting with the muscles and the bones and the fascia and the nervous system, and then into the viscera and the circulatory system, et cetera, et cetera. And I found that learning about all this was fascinating to some of my parts, but also helped me become more embodied. So, with the somatic awareness, I bring in a few body systems, including the nervous system, because you may notice most every system has, either the autonomic nervous system or the central nervous system or a sensory and motor system or whatever. But of course, with the conscious breathing, it's obvious both the respiratory muscles as well as the organs of respiration, which are mainly our lungs, but also our voice box, because they bring in embodied speech. So just bringing more awareness to the little alveoli in our lungs are filling up, and just how everything is opening up and then letting go, just the rhythms of expansion and condensation, and just to get a sense of our anatomy is something that I think we don't have enough training in that. So I wanted to contribute in my book just a bit, and maybe to tickle people's awareness or interest in that. And they can also, the book couldn't be everything. You can, huge tomes are written on anatomy. So if people want to know more about it, there's also really wonderful videos that are you can certainly search, like the Living Body, I think is the one that I have, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
have you seen that one? And
Yes.
particularly like for yoga therapists and yoga trained teachers, and it's just so wonderful though, because a lot of it is animated and you can just see the muscles that are attaching to the bones, and what muscles you're using as you move. And yeah, so it's really, you can kind of like, it's almost like having a virtual dissection, when you're
Yeah,
not
right.
dissection, but what's the word when you're working with a cadaver, it's almost like that, like being able to take off this layer of muscle and feeling the muscle underneath that and taking that up and finding everything of the nervous system and the lymph system and the bones underneath all that. So anyway.
I guess what I was curious about is if there's certain emotions or certain protective parts that hang out in different parts of the body or systems of the body. Like if we tend to have, well, the voice box is a great one, right? Where I feel like I can't stand up for myself, or I feel like, no one listens to me, and then I lose my voice, or I don't know, something like that. I think that's what I was thinking about the connection between. So I think I just need to read the rest of the book.
Yes, and yet I could speak to that. I really like your questions, Tammy, because the example that you gave is a very good one. Because if you're being a client and you're saying, "Oh, I really wish I could have spoken up. It was right on the tip of my tongue, and I just didn't have the courage to really say it," then I might say, "Well, so something blocked you? Yeah, something just blocked me, and I'm really angry with myself for having not been able to really, speak my truth." Well, let's find that part in your body, and you might find it in some tension in your throat. And it might help you if I knew some anatomy that I could talk to you about the process of speaking, and how actually what I would say right now, this is coming to me right now, is um, we need the support for our voice from below. And you can hear, like, if I'm just talking to you more from like up, if I'm not in touch with my belly, but I'm like, well, there's so many things I could say to answer your question, I really don't even know where to begin. But if I just like take a breath and feel into my belly or my core of knowing, and I'm like, and I let that, I breathe into that. I maybe put my hand there, and I say, I've got something I want to share. And then I have support from below, and it can come up through my heart, and it can hopefully have some, heart energy too, so that I might not just be,
Yeah.
saying something. Because sometimes we stop ourselves because we don't want to be hurtful, and sometimes we stop ourselves because we're afraid we won't be heard anyway, we won't be believed, or we've
Yeah.
been punished, so
Yeah.
so yeah, so pointing to the anatomy, or just even getting a sense. That's why we start with our own bodies.
Yeah.
I think I was going to say a lot more about that, but yeah, I like your question, and even just pointing the listener to the fact that the book also offers a chance to at least tap into some anatomy and physiology on a easy to understand level. I hope it's accessible to people.
Yeah. Well, I love that there are so many exercises. Like um it really does invite the reader to, I think, like I said, it does it organically, and then I think it does it with the different exercises.
Oh,
Um
and one more thing though,
Go
because
ahead.
unrelated to the question that you had, because this is important, I do want to make it clear that, because over the years, of course, I've read anything that had to do with body mind. You put the two words together, and I just devour it. And I know that there are some schools of thought out there that do say, oh, pain in the lower back, insecurity about money, tension in your shoulders, up, concern about work, digestive upsets, oh, you're not getting the love you want. So obviously in IFS, um, we really we facilitate the person's inner awareness to find where is that part in your body? What is it saying through your body? What does it need? What does your body tell you that it needs? And, so I just want to emphasize that that's my focus here. Yeah.
I love that. That is exactly, and I'm so glad you're understanding my questions, because I don't feel like I'm being articulate about my questions at all, but I feel like you're answering exactly what I meant. I'm like, good for knowing what I meant and not what I just said. But that's exactly what I mean, because I think I don't know those things and I've heard that before. Like today, I just talked to a kid who was like, all of her friends, like she's in her 20s, all of her friends are having digestive issues, right? So I'm like, and I don't know what that means. Like, so I mean, I can invite her to ask that part of her, but I thought, well, that's interesting. Like, why would, I'm sure it's not all of her friends, I put that in quotes, but I'm like, well, that's interesting. All these poor 20-year-olds, that are just trying to survive college and COVID are having digestive issues. Like, okay, I wonder what that means. Like, I wonder what, yeah.
Well, I'd like to even just say something about that because, I mean, it's just great that she's curious about that. Like, it's not just me, but all my friends, and to just stay curious. But the piece I wanted to add was our gut is so. We're talking about radical resonance, and the body systems associated with resonance are, of course, our limbic brain, right? Our right brain and our limbic structures with the mirror neurons and everything we know now about that from all the wonderful studies they have. But the biggest organ of resonance is the heart, which is the electromagnetic field of the heart is like 5,000 times greater than that of the brain. And then finally, we have the enteric nervous system, the gut, which has as many neurotransmitters and the same kind of neurotransmitters as does our brain. So we have the gut. So yes, all of us across the entire globe are feeling anxious, not just about the pandemic, but also on some level, conscious or not, about about our existence, about the planet, about extinction, about species being lost, about famine and drought and hurricanes and wildfires and just extremes of climate that are threatening the way of life that we have known as a species for many millennium. And we are aware of that. And if we're not actively processing it, we're storing it somewhere. So, and that's just beautiful. Like, not only me do I have this, but my friends have it. And in a way, that is a route to connection. To just say, oh, not just are we all worried about our digestive issues, but perhaps this is a link that we can come together and bring compassion to what we're very. Everyone has their own version of it, but there's so much that is uniting us right now.
Let's talk about the elements, because you mentioned in the meditation about the awareness in the breathing. The awareness and the breathing is connected to
Yeah.
the like kind of earth and sky. I think that's what you said.
Yes.
So tell me about how the elements play into this, because I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you circled back on that because what I didn't say was when we focus on those first two elements together, we really sense our relationship with the vertical, which is very important to be our mast, our anchor, our whatever, just something that really connects us and grounds us and centers us. Another, the C word with self energy, as we move into the more tumultuous or at least complex realm of the relationship. So, as therapists, we begin establishing our awareness of that vertical line. Like, that is such a resource for us. So, whenever we feel a bit, yeah, like you said at the beginning, you felt a little bit jittery, or I don't remember what your word was, but a little bit, and then you connected with above and below, and then you just got more like, yeah. So that's always just moments away. um, these elements have been part of classical thinking for as long as we have recorded history and recorded thinking, and have been a part of healing and just a part of an understanding of the building blocks of our material world and non-material world, actually. But there's usually thought of four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And some systems of thought and systems of healing do them a little differently, like acupuncture has 5 elements and they're slightly different. And some even more Greco-Roman classical thinking includes ether, which is, like we think of as ethereal. It's kind of more the unknown, maybe the energies that we can't really perhaps even measure, but but nevertheless that we experience and that influence us. So it seemed to me that each of these that tuning into these elements can and our understanding of that. For example, the earth, just touching into where we're connected with the floor or the earth, because is a starting point, but also perhaps just meditating a bit on our relationship to the earth. Even in our earliest connection, our earliest grounding was to the wall of the uterus. That's where we connected with the mother. So we have that grounding through our navel, and then we have the grounding through our feet as two-legged creatures. And just the earth, which has sustained us and supported us and give us that sense of belonging. And then the sky, the earth, the element of air, which brings in, yeah, just like we think of so much, we have this wonderful solidity, and that's an aspect of reality, right? But then there's not all of reality. We love the spaciousness and the imagination, and the sky's the limit, just the infinite space way above us. The earth has a limit to it, and we like that sometimes, but the sky, it just goes on forever, so it gives us that sense of possibility and inspiration, literally inspire. And then the water, of course, the earth being 3/4 water, our bodies being 3/4 water, and water is life, right? So, and water is emotion. Water is often associated, if air is associated with intellect, our water is associated with emotion. So that opens us up into deepening into the emotional realms. And fire can be a very gentle warmth of the metabolism within every cell, which is keeping us alive. Or it can be the transformative fire of, we just recognize that even though they're destructive, forest fires also are healthy and necessary for purifying and cleansing. And as a former potter, that one thing that was fascinating for me was taking the earth, the clay from the earth, and adding water to it to make it possible for me to make a shape, and then putting it in a kiln at high temperatures, which transformed it really into more or less rock. There's a depth to fire. At the core of our earth, we know there's enough pressure, and there's transformation. And so when we stay with something in a very deep way, we bring the fire, hopefully in a gentle way, not a not a way that destroys or overwhelms, but in just the right way, that we can bring about the transformative aspect of fire, as well as I love the energy and the creative force. I mean, fire is very, very creative, right? It's just
Yeah.
stimulating.
Well, I love that thinking of fire with movement. Like that makes so much sense that it can be this slow warmth or it could be this bursting,
Yes,
yeah, I
passion,
love
right? It's
that.
our
Yeah.
passion. It's our
Yeah.
leaping and our outrage, even, right? We just
Yeah.
want to be expressed in
Yeah.
our limbs and in our voices, and in our it just wants to be expressed in every cell,
Mm.
in a very
Mm.
fiery way, or a very gentle, warm, soothing way. So
Like a hug.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you look so sad, or we don't get
I
to do
know.
that.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Except for the 9-year-old, you get to hug him.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Let's just check in because it's been an hour. How are you doing? What else do you feel like you want to say? Or do you feel like we've covered a lot? So let's just check in.
Yeah, I like that invitation to just stop and check in and kind of ask. We can both ask ourselves if we feel complete. And then of course adding the body component to that, like how is it, like, because I was going to say, like, kind of quickly, I was going to say, I think it feels complete, but then I get curious about, like, what is it in my body that tells me complete. certainly it's aside from the body, I can just tell that I don't feel like I want to go, oh, and I forgot to say such and such, so I don't have that impulse to like add something. But there is something in my body too. I think I'm drawn to my spine and sort of the lower part of my torso. Just a kind of a settled feeling. Maybe if I use that word, that settled kind of feels right, settled. Yeah, there's something really satisfying about this opportunity you've given me, Tammy, to share about this book that I've spent maybe 2 or 3 years just spending more time than my body wanted me to spend, sitting quietly tapping away at my keys. But even as I was writing it, not even sure, writing it for myself, really, not even knowing what the reception would be. Maybe this is, I'm not quite finished. Maybe I just want to share just a few words about the process and the process of this. Maybe just to share with you that I'm feeling grateful too that you gave me this opportunity to that you're listening so beautifully and with so many intelligent questions, really probing questions that just have invited me to go places I certainly couldn't have gone without your guidance. Um, so I'm feeling some gratitude too, and it's just like a bit of warmth in my heart for that. So yeah, it feels really complete now that I've said that. Yeah. Mm.
Mm.
I love
Part,
seeing you too with your hand on your heart and just nodding. And
mm,
yeah, I'll do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Part of me wants to start crying.
Oh, feel free.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is about you and about the book that is that feels different for me. The only podcast I've ever been nervous about was the one that I did with Dick. And
Mm.
I think that's what it was. I don't know that I was nervous, but I definitely had a lot of different parts up this morning and last night and that felt different. So I'm just feeling really connected to you, and I'm not sure what these tears are about, but they're like happy tears. They're like, you know what it is? This is what it is. Okay. When I lived, I'm from Maryland originally, and it's like when you go home and you see someone you haven't seen for a long time and you start crying.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that. And like when we come back to our bodies, we feel like we've come home, don't we?
Yeah, you just said it. That's it.
Yeah. And we need each other to help us come back to our bodies because there's been so many forces that have pulled us out of our bodies. So you and I have helped each other come back into our bodies today.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time. Today's episode was sponsored by Brighter Vision. What's the point of having a beautiful website if it doesn't attract the clients you want to see? As the worldwide leaders of website design for therapists, Brighter Vision sees this issue happen way too often. A nice looking website doesn't equate to a successful website. The truth is, your current website might even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of website designers will create a website that is centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client so that you can have a nice looking website as well as a successful one. Better yet, Brighter Vision is offering $100 off exclusively for listeners of the One Inside podcast. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/inside. Again, that's brightervision.com/inside. inside.